And I discovered that so many women have gone through postpartum depression and anxiety. And it's just that they don't talk about it. And that was kind of heartbreaking, like at a certain level, because I felt like I wish I knew a little bit more. Like some women don't want to talk about it because they want to forget, they want to close that chapter. But I think it would be so important to talk more about the challenges of motherhood, especially like for new moms, instead of like maybe pretending and everything is okay just because you don't want to show your weaknesses.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Carpe Diem Living the Podcast. I am your host, Shane Gitmed, and today we are speaking with someone who's originally from Italy, but now she's based here stateside, and she's just been all over the map, so I think that is just so cool. Her name is Chiara, and she is here to talk about how spirituality helped heal her from multiple things, from postpartum depression, postpartum anxiety, and more. So, Chiara, tell us about, you and your story.
Hi, thanks so much for having me. So yeah, as you said, I was born in Italy and I stayed there until after university. And then I moved to London. And that's where I met my husband. We had a kind of a complicated love story. And then eventually, we got married in 2014 in San Francisco. And then we traveled the world for a little bit because we wanted to save some money to see the world before having a family. And then we decided to move to Portland, Oregon. And we had our baby in 2019. And we wanted it, so we were excited. And I definitely didn't like pregnancy at all. I never got the pregnancy glow that women talk about. I had morning sickness for the first couple of months. So it was like, oh, okay, this is temporary, right? And then instead, it was replaced then later by heartburn throughout all the pregnancy. So I didn't throw up a lot, but I would always have that sensation like right in my throat. So after eating, it was always terrible. So I kind of hated it, to be honest. And I resisted the experience a lot. I complained a lot. And this is kind of one of the things that I learned that I will talk about. But yeah, resistance, rejection is the worst thing that you can do because you just bring more pain to yourself. So I kind of did it to myself. And then regarding the birth, I wanted a natural delivery. I was open to the epidural, and it was like, okay, but the C-section in my mind wasn't even a thing. It was like, no, it's not going to happen to me. So it's kind of like, it wasn't necessarily being positive. It was more like ignoring the other reality. So that's not good either. And so I went in and I had to go for an induction, but then things were progressing very quickly. So I was like, oh, it's coming, it's on, But then the head of my son got stuck in the process. And so after 4 hours pushing, they had to perform a C-section. It was kind of my worst nightmare because I have a bad relationship with like sharp objects, the blood, and I can't watch the stuff on TV. It's just, so I'm like, okay, well, but in that moment, you just don't have time to think. You don't have time. You don't have a choice. I remember I was just crying and got in the surgery room. And during the procedure, I was actually able to keep it together. My problem came like after the surgery, like my brain couldn't process, and they had to give me anti-anxiety medication because I was like, I don't know what happened. I don't know. I was just going a little bit crazy, and they wanted to put, my son on my chest, and I didn't want him. I was like completely disconnected. And so the first couple of months were hard because I was recovering from the C-section. And so I was kind of like focused on my pain a lot. I obviously did my best to feed my son, but, I was just trying to recover too. And my husband was very helpful though. So, I mean, the first couple of months went by really fast. The problem came when he went back to work. When he went back to work, or the night before, I don't remember, I felt that this anxiety coming to me, and I didn't know where it was coming from, but I kind of had a panic attack. I was like, I don't know what's going on, but I felt this sense of like, I don't want to be alone with this baby. Cause like, I couldn't trust myself, like in a way of like keeping this baby alive, having the responsibility of this little being, you know. And so I told my husband that I was having a lot of anxiety, and he said like, you know, if you need to talk to someone. And so I called my OB and I explained the situation, and she said like, you know, you can talk to someone, I can book you with someone who can help you. And then I also looked for other women on Facebook. You know, Facebook is such an easy tool where you can connect with other women who had gone through the same thing. And I discovered that so many women have gone through postpartum depression and anxiety, and it's just that they don't talk about it. And that was kind of heartbreaking, like at a certain level, because I felt like I wish I knew a little bit more. Like some women don't want to talk about it because they want to forget, they want to close that chapter. But I think it would be so important to talk more about the challenges of motherhood, especially like for new moms, instead of like maybe pretending and everything is okay just because you don't want to show your weaknesses. And so I connected with some women, but what happened then was that the more I talk about these negative feelings that I experienced, the worse I felt. And so I was like, this is not working for me. You know, it may work for many other people, you know, because people like talking to people who have been through the same thing so they don't feel as lonely. But it didn't work with me. And I was like, I just feel so miserable when I talk about these feelings. I don't know. It's just that I feel that the more I talk about them, I identify with them. And I didn't want to do that. So it's not that I wanted to ignore them. I just didn't want to identify with that. And so I asked my family and friends to just remind me about the person I was. So in a sense, like I convinced my brain that it was temporary. So whatever was going on was like, this is not my new reality. This is like a moment in time. It's temporary. I've always been like a person in love with life, very positive. This can't be my new norm. And so I said, yeah, please remind me of the person I was. And so, you know, about the things that we did together and the fun we had and the inspiring things I said and things like that. And so that was kind of like really good for me because it reminded me of this other identity that I kind of had lost, you know. So it was kind of a loss of identity that I think many women experience, because for me it was really like someone was giving me a new life, but I already had a life. And so like how do I integrate these two realities? So that was the big challenge for me. So I definitely felt like a loss of identity, but there was like something else that I couldn't quite put my finger on. I was like, there's something else, there's something deeper that I don't know what it is. And so I've read a lot about spirituality and especially the chakra system. So I'm very familiar with it, but I guess I never really put it in practice, like really like trying to listen to my body. What is it telling me? And so I was like, okay, so what's going on in my body, mind, and spirit right now? You know, so I try to really focus. And when the anxiety came, just try to breathe into it and more like trying to listen what my body was telling me. And so I had kind of pressure on my chest. And the fourth chakra is all about love and compassion and self-love. And so when this word came to my mind, I was like, yeah, this is it. That's the problem. You know, it was kind of revelation for me when I started to listen more to my body. And the problem was that I had stopped loving myself, because the moment you think you're not going to be a good mom, and you know you're not going to be able to take care of your son, you see yourself as a bad person. And when you see yourself as a bad person, you stop loving yourself.
It's like a domino effect.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And so I was like, how can I love my son when I don't love myself? So it starts from here. And so I decided kind of like to start like different practices to reconnect with my heart, you know, like meditating with like loving kindness and sending light to the space in the heart, a positive affirmation about loving myself. And with time, it worked. You know, I was able to kind of retrain my brain, and made me feel so powerful, because I was like, wow, you know, the brain can be retrained. You know, it's about using the right tools and being disciplined. And so the chakra offered a roadmap for me to then get to the root of the problem and use specific tools related to self-love that could help me.
Oh my gosh, I love that, because I feel like as moms, like how you said with how can you be able to give that love to your son, a partner, anyone, if you don't love yourself. And it's true that we do lose our identity, especially, you know, when you've been a wife or you became a mom. Like it's so easy to get it all lost in the mix, because women, we tend to put everything before ourselves. And so we kind of do get lost in the mix. And I've experienced that myself. So I totally understand how that feels. And being a new mom, as of course it would give anyone anxiety. And for me, I already had anxiety before I became a mom. So it skyrocketed. So I totally understand what you mean. You're just like, oh, like taking care of this baby by yourself. Like I had similar feelings, especially during the newborn phase, because you're just like, you want to feel like you have that safety net, you have an extra pair of hands in case anything were to go on. And I think as my son got older, of course, I got more comfortable. And now being a single mom, I have no choice. I have to do this all on my own. It definitely takes practice, but I love that you're able to tap into yourself and recognize, like, okay, like, especially with the chakras. I think once people discover the chakra system and they know how to be in touch with themselves and know, like, oh, my head or my crown chakra is off, my heart chakra is off, then you know the tools on how to get it back to where it's supposed to be. Because that disconnect is so real. Like, I remember, I forget where I found this, but there was a sheet that would tell me, or that told me, if you're feeling like you're disconnected from others or from the world, and you just kind of feel like you have like brain fog, that can mean your crown chakra is off. And so now whenever I feel anything off with myself, I kind of go through that list, like, oh, okay, how am I feeling? And then I'm like, oh, okay, so this chakra is blocked, this chakra is blocked, and then you know what to work on. So those mantras are powerful. I know that for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, I think when you start to really understand and feel the chakra system in yourself and you're in touch with it, you kind of like you see everything through the chakra lenses, which can be, kind of like funny in a sense that like now
Yeah.
that I have a baby, I'm like, I want to make sure that all his chakras are aligned for what I can do, because then
Yeah.
obviously he'll go in the world, but for what as far as I'm concerned, I have to make sure his chakras are aligned.
Yeah, exactly. Because I'm telling you, inner work, it is work. Like, it sounds like, I mean, everyone's getting more into like, okay, self-care, but I'm like, no, it's more than bubble baths and eating chocolate, or no, no, no. For me, it's a very spiritual thing where it's like you have to be in your element, just really checking in on where you're at mentally, physically. And yeah, I've known women that have suffered with postpartum depression, and it was hard to watch, because it's like, we know they love their child, but it's just something is going on internally that they have to fine tune. And I think who told me this? I know someone else told me that postpartum depression can come up again, like when the child becomes a toddler, because it's like a different phase and it's like a whole nother thing. And I believe that, because there was a time as my son was, growing up, I'm like, okay, we're good. And then toddler phase came up and I was like, oh, my anxiety is through the roof right now. So I think as women, as moms, it's so important that we have these tools in our toolbox. So whenever we need it, we just whip it out. And we're human. So it's totally fine that we have to continue on, as with maintenance with our spirituality and checking in. So if people don't believe in chakras, man, you're missing out, because
Right?
it's a
Yeah. And
real
I also
thing.
think that, like, going back to what you said about anxiety coming back, I think that anxiety has a root. And I think it depends on the history of the person too. And where does it reside? Like, what is it? For me, it was like a huge fear of responsibility and like a sense of like the root chakra, lack of safety and security. So I think that when you're able to tap into that root of that anxiety, that's really when you can heal, because the anxiety is kind of a symptom, but it comes from like a place, like a blockage that comes from a specific chakra, one or two it can be. But I mean, that you can get to that level of understanding when you understand also the history of the person, of yourself. You have to go back sometimes, really back in
Absolutely.
time, with the relationship with your parents, what happened when you grew up. It's kind of like psychology, but like in a different way, like you use the seven centers to guide you.
I totally understand with what you're saying, because going back in time definitely helps. Like, I've had to do that for myself, because just like with holistic medicine, we always want to find the root, right? So I apply that mentality to everything. I'm like, nothing is just on the surface. We really have to go all the way to the very beginning to figure out how we can resolve this once and for all, or have a better idea of what we're dealing with. So yeah, even for me, I know what's helped with my anxiety after having my son is a lot of meditating. Whenever I feel like anything is, bubbling up, I'm like, I just need to take a second. Essential oils have been wonderful. Like, I am a huge fan of aromatherapy, and they actually have one for children too. Like, if they're like really fussy, or if they're just throwing a lot of tantrums, like there's stuff that helps with that. So yeah, any natural method I'm all about. So yeah, but that's
Totally
wonderful
agree.
that you found spirituality to heal all of this, because I mean, I'm not to knock on anyone that's taking medication, but that's what I worry about, is like, if you do have postpartum depression or postpartum anxiety, taking a medication on top of that, and there's side effects, and it's that makes the situation even harder to deal with, in my opinion. And so, I mean, if you have taken it, it's, that's totally fine. But for me personally, I knew that if I took anything along those lines, I just didn't know what, like what state I would be in my own mental state.
I totally agree. Yeah.
Yeah.
I would totally avoid that. I would be so afraid to get either addicted or,
Yeah,
like it
brain
scares me.
chemistry. Yeah, yeah. And I remember there was even a time, and I know I've mentioned this in the past to other moms, that I was prescribed an anxiety medication. And technically it's for depression, but because anxiety and depression are tied, they're just like, oh, it's for both. And I remember holding that prescription in my hand, like really battling. And I feel like this was my inner voice telling me, like, it just kept telling me, like, you do not want to take this, because the second it's in your system, who knows, and so I could not ignore that guide that was speaking to me. And so I never did, and then I just found natural ways to handle it, and it's great. So
Good for you. It's so
yeah,
empowering.
yeah, you just have to know that even though you're feeling all these things, you are bigger than those emotions and those thoughts. That's, like, I think, another aspect we really have to see it as.
Yeah, yeah. There's a metaphor that I love, that we are the ocean and our emotions are waves. It gives you really like that sense of temporariness. But the problem is that many people want to just escape and reject, going back to that idea of resisting something. If you reject anxiety, if you resist it, then it's going to come back stronger. You have to kind of like, your objective is taking power away from it. When you stop identifying with your feelings and emotions, you take power away from anxiety, because you see like that bigger reality. But the most important thing is to breathe into it when anxiety is present, because the problem is also that the brain wants to attach meaning naturally. So when we are in a negative emotion, especially, it's incredibly dangerous to let the brain decide what the meaning of the emotion is. Because once we are in that dark space, for me, like the brain having these negative emotions about the baby was like, oh, you don't love your baby, you're a bad person, right? That's not the truth. But if you let the brain take over during that emotion, then it's going to attach a meaning that is not true. And so you can definitely investigate and get to the root of your anxiety, but I would say not in the moment the anxiety is present, like do it later.
Right, because then those thoughts will spiral and everything like that. And I actually did somewhat of a, not experiment, but I want to test it, especially when I was really learning and understanding breath work. I was feeling anxiety bubbling up, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to go into my room, lay down, and just be silent. Like, just be silent. And because for me, I get flare-ups if my anxiety and my stress are really high. And so my hands, I started to feel the flare up, and then after maybe about 10 minutes, it was completely gone. And so it's almost like, to me, it's a reminder of how powerful the mind is, how powerful we are, when we really take a second to just pause and just check in. Like, I can't tell you enough on how many situations, as especially my son, he's a very, very energetic toddler. So it can be quite the day, when you're working from home and everything. But I know that these tools will help, moms with kids of all ages, like we all go through different challenges, and your son's is 1 year old, right? So that phase, it's very crucial with everything that's going on. But one thing I love about your background is you're a published writer, and you've contributed to several publications. So you write about spirituality, and like, what kind of other topics do you cover?
So mainly health and wellness. I started to work with like companies, and then I became a regular contributor of Medical News Today. So mainly about actually medical stuff. Not that I have
Amazing.
knowledge of it, but my talent is to be able to take complicated information and translate it into something easy for the public.
That's
And
wonderful.
then recently I wrote about postpartum depression and anxiety, and it was published by Good Housekeeping. You know, you pitch it, and then it was accepted and published, and so that was huge because it's a
That's
big
so
name.
awesome. Yeah,
And
congratulations.
thank you. And it also allowed me to talk to so many other women and say it's okay. And I also wanted to stress the fact that it took me, the title of the article is, it took me months to love my son, and I don't feel guilty about it. I don't want mothers, especially new moms, to feel guilty, because you're going to make so many mistakes as a parent. The best thing you can do, it's kind of like take a moment to take in all the possible mistakes that you don't even know, and then let it go and release it and forgive yourself now, once, for all the ones that you're going to make, because the sense of like guilt can be really, really damaging.
Forgiving ourselves during those times where you didn't feel like the best mom. And trust me, like I especially have had those moments like after a really bad day, and whether it's tantrum filled or whatever happens. For me personally, I know my anxiety mainly bubbled up when we were in public. Like no one wants to have their child throwing a tantrum in public, and then you feel like you don't have control of the situation. It's just like, and it's just me that's like handling it. So I'm like, oh my gosh, this is a lot. And then at the end of the day, it really is just reminding yourself that you are doing the best you can. You are the best mother for this child. You guys will get through this. And it's just kind of, yeah, tapping into your inner voice, just repeating those positive affirmations and things so the negative emotions don't take over. And I just want to highlight like what you mentioned about when you reject the feelings versus acknowledging them and working through them, it's just going to keep coming back. It's kind of like, yeah, just like putting a band-aid on something, and we know that's never a good thing, especially when it comes to health, mental health, physical health. It's just not good. I think that's perfect that you're able to share your story and talk to other women that will completely relate. And I'm just glad that now we're in this day and age where we do have a lot of modalities that can help us through this, and we're not just relying on a medication, or we have ways that are more effective than that now.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So now you work with moms exclusively, like through motherhood and health, or?
No, it's kind of like the story that, like, that's the reason why I decided to start my spiritual business, because I put together these tools, and I felt like I think I can give people like a bigger picture of what's going on in their life, and tools for self-healing, because I believe in self-healing, so I consider myself a therapist. It's more about holistic spiritual way. I can give you these tools, and then obviously you have to do the work, right? So I definitely work more with women. I wouldn't say necessarily moms, because like, as you know, everybody has blockages like in the
Right.
chakra system, but definitely, yeah, more women, but not necessarily just moms. And basically what I do is like, I have a questionnaire that can help me understand the blockages in the chakra system, and then I talk to the person for 1 hour. And then my kind of spiritual counseling is initially in written form. So it's kind of a document where I do an analysis of the chakra system, the blockages, why there are blockages, where they are, and tools to remove these blockages. And then I have a little part about like the astrological and Ayurveda profile, because I think it can also help to see the bigger picture of the person and why there are certain patterns and behaviors. And then I do 2 tarot readings, but I don't ask the person what they want to know. I ask my guides, what does the person need to know right now in this moment of their life? And then I look at their soul's path, because I believe that we come here as souls to learn lessons, specific lessons that come to us through these events and synchronicities that keep on happening in our life. Like you can meet different people, but always have the same bad relationship. And then there's something there to be uncovered. And it's part of this big lesson, because I believe we make spiritual contracts before coming here on this earth, and we decide, so what's the lesson? So I can help the person understand, this is what's going on in your life, and this is why, and this is the lesson you need to learn. And so with all these tools, I can give, a way, like a roadmap to self-empowerment and self-healing.
That's amazing, because I know the more that we spread this awareness to people, just the more healing that would happen in general, especially during this time of COVID. everyone's suffering in one way or another with what's going on. And I know before this recording, we were talking about traveling and how, it's been really hard being away from family and friends and just trying to make the best out of the situation this year. So it can be really hard. Like I know for myself throughout COVID, there were times where certain chakras were blocked, and thank goodness I have, a background and the tools on removing the blockages. It's no longer a guessing game, because I know years ago you would just think like, oh, I'm just going through it and whatever. And I don't know if you're familiar with human design, but with human design, once you know your type, then you're able to kind of have a better understanding of just yourself in general. And so it's kind of tricky because for my type, like we have emotional waves. When we're going through something pretty hard, we're in that wave for like a good while, and then once we ride that out versus rejecting it, like you said, which I just I think just staying aware of yourself is important. Then you can remove those blockages like yourself, or just know like what you need to turn to as your resources. But for someone that's brand new, let's say they don't know anything about chakras and just want to figure out the blockages, what's like a couple, I guess, 3 ways that a person could check in with themselves and feel like, okay, this may or may not be blocked for myself?
So I think that because chakras belong to specific parts of the body and specific parts of life, I think it goes like this 2 ways for me. That's kind of like the idea. I think that for people it's probably easier to talk about the physical level. So not just like pain, but I would say like discomfort, or like, as I said before, like pressure, like feeling a sense of weight, just try to really feel your body and what's going on at the body level. So I think this is important, because if there is like a specific area, or for example, like chronic issues that you have, the chronic issues is like a huge indicator that that chakra is blocked. But yeah, as you said, chakras can come and go, and can be, different in different phases of life, although like we may have one that is a little bit weaker, and then you start to understand that because it keeps on coming back. So I would say one is definitely the physical level, and then there's like the more like the area of your life. So start to think about, I don't know, to give an example, like regarding the 5th chakra, that is about communications and self-expression, especially that I'm feeling so much, almost like a collective blockage right now of the 5th, because there's so much division, there's so much fear of like talking and saying the wrong thing or not being misunderstood, that this blockage is translating also into our personal lives. And so it's becoming a little bit harder for some people to express themselves. So I would start to just wonder, did I really find a way to express myself? Like, and it can be in any way, like in being more direct in the family, or, just in an artistic way, in a creative way. And little things like a cold or like a sore throat can be an indicator, not always. I don't want to say that every time you have a cold or like a sore throat is an indicator of that there is a blockage, but like pay attention to the physical body and the area of your life, and try to find these connections, because I think it's all about connections. When you talk also about these different areas of spirituality, I think that the most fascinating thing for me was like picking and choosing from different areas and branches of spirituality, and kind of create my little religion. So what resonates with me and what can I use to help people? So I think that finding these connections is incredibly powerful. And you can, and I think the best way you can do that, if you're not used to it, as you said, like you're a beginner, I think that writing things down, like in a way, like journaling about these things can be an incredible tool. You can just like ask yourself specific question about your chronic pain, about that discomfort. Where do you feel it exactly, and why do you think it may be connected to a specific chakra? You may be wrong, but you start to do that investigation, and slowly but surely your intuition will guide you.
Absolutely. And for me, I like to look for patterns. Like I like to see like, okay, when do I feel like I'm a little bit disassociated, or when do I feel like I don't feel heard? Like I try to, the investigation I think is important. And you know what? I just realized that I had bought in this darn it, it's not over here. But at Target, they had this workbook where it's about the chakras. And I was like, this is just a fun way to kind of, it's like an adult workbook for it. So I'm like, oh, this is cool. I
cool.
saw it. Yeah. And it's kind of like, I guess not for beginners, but it's just more of a way to simplify what they mean. Cause I'm one of those people, like I'm not much of a reader. Like I need to see like a visual. So if I'm like coloring it in, if I'm like writing it out, it registers better. So yeah, so I think it's just important that one, that we educate ourselves about how our spiritual health can really impact us if we're not careful. And two, how we can, apply it to all layers of our life and spread it to those around us, because a lot less people would be confused on like what's going on here, why do I feel like this, when we have these modalities. So I'm thankful for people like you that can help, especially women, find ways to help themselves so they can be better versions of themselves for, their family or their child. Like, I just think it's so important because, of course, the famous saying that you can't give from an empty cup. And I really, really had to emphasize that saying for years, because for the longest time, I couldn't be the best version of myself, especially as a mom to my son, when I wasn't, sleeping right. I was constantly stressed. My chakras were all over the place, emotional wreck. Like that's what it was. So, yeah, I love being able to go back and, share that journey too. And it is inspiring think about it this way. There's a lot of new moms, especially during this time. Imagine the anxiety and the postpartum depression they're feeling right now when they don't have the same experience, when we're not in a COVID-19 world. So like I know someone that gave birth to a baby earlier in the spring, and how horrible that their family couldn't be there, during the time of birth. They're wearing masks. It's just very strange and a very strange experience. So my heart goes out to everyone that's trying to make the best out of being a new mom during this time, especially. I'm very empathetic towards that. So
yeah, same. And I would say that I'm hoping that many more people are opening up to spirituality as a way to heal. And I think, as you said, it's so great that there are people like us, and we need more. Like, we want, like, the dream would be to see spirituality more like as a mainstream tool, and any type of spirituality, because I think that people often confuse it with religion. It's not religion. Spirituality for me, it's kind of, my definition of it is the fall of the illusion of separation. When you start to understand that as humans we're all connected, that we're connected to the planet, that we're connected to a bigger source, you're spiritual. Right. And then obviously you grow from there, and spirituality includes pain, because growth is painful. So you're gonna have to go through your shadow and other things, that are a little bit darker, but it's so worth it.
Right. It is so worth it. And it's very fascinating stuff. So if you're new to this, I feel like once you see it actually working in your life, especially once you've had, a Reiki session or any of that, how can you not be a believer of what it feels like to remove the blockages? I've known people after they've had their first Reiki session, they're like, I feel like a huge weight off of my shoulders. They feel lighter. They don't feel as much like mental baggage. And then you see that they're just operating in a very, smooth way. And they're like, oh, I feel amazing. And that's exactly what it feels like when your chakras are aligned. The one misconception is that of course things will happen and it may become a little bit out of balance, but that's why you just have to work at it. And that's why you just maintain it. Just like anything with your health, you can't work out one day and expect to, not gain weight. Like, it's just, you got to constantly work at it.
Even like Reiki, it's like one time, but then you have to work on yourself, it can help. But work, you have to do the work. There's no escape.
Yeah. You can't rely on that whatsoever. I'm just so thankful for all this knowledge. And, that's so awesome that you write all these articles for magazines, which I will definitely check out, because I just think, more and more people need to, really learn from those that are aligned and are aware of like how spirituality can really benefit their lives. So yeah, I definitely agree that when spirituality becomes more mainstream, and I feel like we're on that right track, because Joe Dispenza's work and everyone else's work that's out there, it's becoming more known. So I couldn't be more excited to see that movement happen over time.
Same.
Yeah. I'm here for it. So yeah, tell our listeners on where they can find you online to connect with you, other than our Facebook Insiders group.
Yeah, so the website is www, my name, Chiara, B like Bravo, Townley, like my last name, all one word, .com. And you can find everything about me, like my articles and my guidance project. That is the one that I mentioned.
Perfect. And of course, all of her links and information will be in the description box on all of our social media channels and through our Facebook group. So if you ever just want to say hi or ask Chiara some questions, we're here for it. So just let us know and we'll catch you all next time. Thank you all so much for listening today.